We are going to be moving on to our second match of the day. It is going to be Mexico versus Singapore, and this is happening within Group G. So Singapore right now has a 0-1 record. Mexico is 1-1. And here we can see the player lists for both teams. Mexico is Irving, Epsilon, Yunus, and Empanizado, and Singapore, Sequinox, Crumpled, Aaron, and Envy. And TJ, you actually, I believe, have spent time with all of the players on the Singapore team.
Yeah, I've met each of them. I've traveled to, I think, 4 Southeast Asian majors at this point, maybe 5.
That's a lot of travel time.
Yeah, it is. But, you know, the Southeast Asian scene in general is pretty cool. They're very close-knit within their own respective communities, especially Singapore, since it's such a small country with such a concentrated population of Hearthstone players, that it's a pretty cool place to be. But there's Mexico. The Mexican team as well, they're currently 1-1, so trying to prove themselves and sort of underdogs themselves because they're not as well known. But they're pretty close to us geographically. That's a fact.
That is true.
I could throw a baseball to Mexico right now.
Okay. Maybe you should be playing in a different field, but okay.
Yeah.
You definitely make more money in MLB.
And there's
Hearthstone.
There's Singapore. Singapore is a pretty cool country. It's sort of a country and a city in one. You can drive across the entire country of Singapore in like 30 minutes.
That's crazy
to
me.
From end to end. It's a big, like, you know, like, what was it, shipping hub?
Okay. Yeah, it seemed like a large metropolitan area with, obviously, it has all that coastline.
Yeah, when you fly above Singapore, like when you fly into the airport, just like the entire ocean below Singapore is filled with cargo ships. It's
That's
insane.
awesome.
Like for miles and miles. As far as the eye can see, it's just like ships out there. It's a pretty crazy sight, and then you come up on this like pretty cool city.
Yeah, I mean, 2 beautiful countries and 2 teams that aren't nearly as competitive as a lot of the standout teams we've been seeing so far in the Hearthstone Global Games. But we do actually have a short piece from Envy, a member of the team from Singapore, to give us his thoughts on the Hearthstone Global Games.
I'm Envy, and Singapore will win the Hearthstone Global Games. Because of the way Hearthstone Global Games is structured, it's not really imperative that each individual player is very good at what they do, because you can discuss with each other when you make your plays. I think for HCG it's more about how you communicate and using your brain powers effectively as a team. So I think if you split the workload, it makes more sense rather than thinking about it as an individual skill kind of thing. Inherently, Hearthstone is a fairly social game, so to make a claim that like it is usually very individualistic is not entirely true. It's not that difficult to play Hearthstone with a group of people, even though it's a game which a lot of times you're playing with friends. Like, you know, you leave the house, people look over your shoulder, you know, they give you advice. It comes quite naturally to the way the game is played in general. The Singapore scene is very small, but it's also incredibly competitive. So I think because of the sheer concentration, our local scene is quite robust. We do practice with each other, we do play with each other here and there, and we're all kind of friends, right? I mean, whenever you meet up for a tournament, you see the same faces. I think it's necessary for a competitor to go in. You don't go in thinking you're going to get second. You go in thinking you're going to win and get first. If you don't have that mentality, you're always going to lose.
Well, the team from Singapore may not have the highest competitive pedigree, but Envy did sound very confident that they were an underdog team, but they're definitely still a team to keep your eye on. And obviously, you would know that better than a lot of people having spent time with them.
Yeah, you know, Envy sort of mentioned it, is that Singapore is very small, but they're a very close-knit community, and they actually have a lot of Hearthstone players.
Yeah.
And they all talk with each other, even ones that are on different teams. I mean, you'll see it with these guys. 3 of them are on, you know, Team Abyssus, and Aaron is on Mana Search, which is, you know, another team, another Singaporean or Southeast Asian team. So, you know, but they all come together. Aaron's probably the guy with the most competitive experience. You saw it on your screen. He played in the Last Call Invitational 2016, so he's one of the top point earners in the entire Asia Pacific region. So
That's impressive.
He's probably the guy with the most, but Envy, he's up there. He had some success at the Malaysia major, which was the most recent Southeast Asia major, and it had some pretty crazy players. Tom 60229 ended up winning that, so had some really strong players in that field, and I believe he made it in the top 4. So that's a feat for itself, within itself, and I think these guys pride themselves in their communication as well, since they played together so often.
Yeah.
So that's a strength for global games.
Yeah, it absolutely is. To have that rapport within your team before you even come into the Hearthstone Global Games means that maybe your team communication's better. Maybe you have very similar ideas about what works well in a tournament format, and maybe it gives you a bit of an edge. Whereas Mexico is... there's not really much of a Hearthstone scene in Mexico whatsoever. A lot of the players on the Mexican team are personalities instead of competitive players. So if you're looking at these two teams next to each other, Singapore certainly has more competitive experience. But here we can see how the lineups are going to go. Up first, it's going to be Yunus taking on Envy, and then they will be our aces as well.
Yeah, starting off first and ending it out as well. And pretty even deck distribution there. I always like to look at which two classes they bring, because it's very similar if you look at from week to week. Even not even just from team to team, but across all the teams, like the decks that they pair together.
Yeah.
Like Priest and Mage are often seen together. Druid and Rogue are often seen together, just because they sort of do completely different things when it comes down to it. So you always want to throw your opponent off and not give them an easy choice for their deck. So I always like to look at that. And right now it just seems like it's a pretty diverse field. Mexico's don't make as much sense, but I can see why they would go for it. Singapore seems to have like sort of the standard global games deck pairings as far as that goes. And Warlock, poor Warlock.
Yeah, I mean, you said it yourself. You don't want to pair two decks together where one is obviously going to be the one that you're going to choose, and anything that you pair with Warlock kind of is going to be obvious. I do think that maybe Mexico's choices have something to do with just what the players are comfortable with bringing. We saw them in their first match of the Hearthstone Global Games. Epsilon brought Hunter, and she had kind of the most interesting mid-range Hunter build that we've seen thus far into Journey to Ungoro. So maybe just personal comfort picks has something to do with it. But let's go ahead and take a look at Group G. That is the group that both of these teams are in. It's also like Group E, not well fleshed out at this point. All of these teams have only played 2 matches, and they're all rather close together in the standings.
Yeah, Singapore, we haven't just really seen much from them. They had a really close match early on, and now they're just 0-1. So they could really be anywhere at this stage. They still have a potential to finish 4-1 with a really good game score, considering they got 2 wins in that 1 loss. So them being at the bottom of the standings, I don't feel is really...
it's not representative of them.
It really isn't. So this match, I think, is going to tell a lot about where these two teams stand. If Singapore takes a convincing win, then you could probably put Singapore as one of the top teams in this group, because Mexico, they did look a little shaky even in their win. So we'll have to see. I mean, again, like I said, this match is going to tell us a lot about sort of the structure of this group and where we can expect teams to sort of finish out the first group stage with.
Yeah, I think in a lot of the other groups, you can sort of dictate maybe a rough 1, 2, 3. At least the teams that you would expect to come out of the group ahead. But in this one, I mean, Turkey's up 2-0, but I don't know that anybody would have gone into the global game saying, okay, Turkey's going to come out ahead in this group. We just don't know a lot about these teams. There's not a lot of prominent figures from any of these countries, but we'll have to see. Maybe Singapore can make a name for themselves, and they can start doing it today. So, game number 1, Yunus and Envy. It's going to be a Rogue mirror. Obviously, we've only seen Quest Rogue up until this point. I would expect we'd see some more Quest Rogue. And looking at the alternatives, I don't think you want to be paired up against Rogue if you're Quest Warrior or if you're Jade Druid.
Yeah, that is actually pretty interesting, the way that they picked here. If you looked at Singapore's side, they had Rogue and Druid, and then there was Rogue and Warrior on the other side. So if that's a Quest Warrior, you don't want to play it for the potential that, potential that they pick Rogue. But if it's Rogue and they have Aggro Druid, you don't want the Rogue because they're going to play Aggro Druid. So they're just both sort of going with, well, let's just give up on the mind games and pick the best deck out of the two. And they both settle on Rogue. So it's pretty funny to see how, when it gets down to it, they try and, mind games each other, but then they both just end up picking the best one. So we'll see if it's Quest Rogue versus Quest Rogue. Probably. Wow, Yunus is all smiles.
He's a happy guy. Ready to play some Hearthstone.
Yeah. And there's Envy.
All smiles here from Envy as well.
Yeah. Not playing together this week. Envy actually, I did the interview for him for the little piece we just made, and he actually just graduated from university.
Well, that's a mug of a winner.
That mug is great.
It's the mug of champions.
What a mug!
That's the mug of graduates right there.
Yeah.
But it was a great piece, TJ. So good job on the interview there. But he did seem very confident in his team. I think he said, Singapore is going to win the Hearthstone Global Games. That's saying a lot.
I make them say that.
Okay, well.
They all say that because I forced them to.
Freaking TJ. All right, so ignore everything I just said. Maybe they're not confident at all. But I would hope that they are at least a little bit. Because, like you said, they've gotten to know each other very well.
Yeah.
They play together very well. You can't feel too bad about that.
Yeah.
Or maybe you can. I don't know.
It's not Quest
I've
Rogue.
learned to never make definitive statements.
They're not playing
It's
Quest
not.
Rogue.
My goodness.
That's incredible.
Wow.
All right, so
That's Nutter Butters.
that is 100% Nutter Butter. All right, so Singapore is playing what looks to be a Miracle Rogue. What?
Oh, that's not going to work too well when your opponent's playing Rogue.
They did draw patches, though, and Yunus is not happy about that.
TJ.
But this is interesting. Hallucination is basically discover a card.
Well, if you're playing Hallucination Undercity Huckster maybe on 2, Ethereal Peddler can give you some pretty significant discounts. If you're holding cards that are not normally in your class, you give them a 2-mana cost reduction.
But it's Rogue versus Rogue.
Yeah, that's where it
So
gets
it's
bad.
a 5-mana 5/6.
Yep. That's it's a pit fighter right there.
Yeah, so now Singapore has to make the decision of which one of these cards they want to go with. This is actually really tough because all these cards are pretty mediocre.
They're not great.
Yeah.
Maybe you can Mimic Pod into additional burn. Maybe Razor Petal can give you a big Edwin.
I don't even know.
I certainly have not played this variant of Miracle Rogue. I mean, if you're playing Arcane Giants, Razor Petal Volley gets you closer to Arcane Giant, but you probably don't even have enough time then because you're playing against Quest Rogue. I really don't think if you're Singapore that you would want to queue this Rogue against Quest Rogue.
Maybe they were hoping it was something different. Maybe they just really liked this Rogue deck and wanted to play it no matter what their opponents chose.
I mean, it looks fun. It's new and inventive.
Sure.
At least looking at Ethereal Peddler.
Yeah. And Yunus has bounce effects. He's got both Youthful Brewmaster and the Gadget and Ferryman, so just needs one more in order to be able to complete the quest with whatever minion he chooses to. And now this is sort of where you have to make the decision of what minion am I going to decide to bounce. If you understand that it's either going to be one of these charge minions you have in your hand or something that you want to pick up in the next couple turns, you just play the Novice Engineer here. But if you feel like the Novice Engineer is going to be the card that you want to be the one that gets bounced, then it's just a dagger up.
I hope you like my
I mean,
And it looks
usually
like they made the decision.
usually you want to bounce cards that are going to give you the most additional resources.
Novice Engineer
so
gives you resources.
Yeah, I can understand why you would want to bounce, or the most additional effects. So,
Did
you know, Glacial Shard. Yeah, I saw the Elise the Trailblazer. I was going to finish the thought, but it doesn't matter. That's pretty cool.
What in the world?
I mean, if you get an Angoro pack and you get cards that are not normally in your class, you can reduce the cost of those cards with Ethereal Peddler.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I'm going to go try that. That sounds fun.
Unless you get all neutral cards, and then you're just sad. But this is all the bounce effects that they need, and they just pick whatever minion in their hand.
God.
Well, they can get the Ethereal Peddler, it's going to be, I suppose, not the Elise the Trailblazer.
Yeah, I guess one more health is better. Do you even want an Angoro pack in your deck right now?
Yeah, but this is going to be downhill from Singapore because Mexico is going to be able to finish the quest this turn. And then they're going to be able to... can they actually... No, they can't. I was going to say, can they prep out the quest this turn?
No, they would need 2 mana. And they will only have 1.
Yeah. But they are going to be able to complete it this turn, and they have 2 charge minions in their hand.
Drink with me, friend.
So this one is just about all she wrote.
I love to give marks for creativity, and this Rogue deck is very different than anything we've been seeing, but unfortunately, Quest Rogue is just so very strong.
Yeah, I feel like maybe if this rogue got off to a little bit of a faster start, it could have been okay, but...
I don't even know what it has that constitutes a
then
fast
again,
start.
no,
Like, what does
no.
it have in the early game?
I take that back. Because this deck just doesn't look like it could do well in a rogue mirror matchup. Because I think that Ethereal Peddler shows us that it relies on getting that tempo, from the cards. I mean, this is going to be a pretty strong board. They can push 9 damage here, put him down to 21. They're threatening 14 plus 8 plus 1. I mean, they're getting close to being able to have lethal if their board isn't dealt with, but this is going to be a quest completion here this turn for Mexico with the prep. And they're going to be able to start removing some of this stuff from the board, so...
I mean, you prep and play it, and you can clear both minions if you're willing to take 9 damage to the face.
Yeah.
I guess you don't even need to. You don't have to, but I don't think you want to give up 3 chargers. Well, 9 puts Yunus in a rather scary position, I guess.
Yeah. Take 9, you go down to 12. 12 is still pretty safe, especially if the board is clear and you have a minion still left on the board to challenge.
I mean, what is in Singapore's deck? Could they have Leroy?
Maybe.
Probably a second copy of Eviscerate, but... Oh.
They just went face!
Oh! Envy has 19 with Hero Power Eviscerate? Oh.
Can't do it.
Well. That sucks.
And you can't sap one of these.
It would have had to be another Eviscerate off the top.
Even then, would that have been enough?
Yeah, because you can Eviscerate for 2, Eviscerate for 4. Hero Power, that's 7.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it would have been 21.
That's scary. They gave him an out for lethal. Not that they would have known.
Do you want to do that?
Mexico wanted to do that.
Yeah, I mean, they did it. It would have had to be exactly Eviscerate non-comboed, Eviscerate comboed Hero Power.
Yeah.
For kill.
All right, charge minion is lethal. Also,
Shadow Step or Ferryman or Brewmaster.
Yeah, or Swashbuckler can pick up any number of things.
It can pick up Shadow Step.
Or Cold Blood. Betrayal, though, not.
Oh, so hurtful.
But Betrayal can clear off one of these minions. Probably the 9 attack one, and then you just hit face and hit face with dagger. Yeah. Maybe not, though.
Maybe you Betrayal on the 9 to kill off the 5/6. You could just take 9.
Yeah. I mean, they were willing to take 14 last turn, so I think they can take 9 with the dagger this turn and be okay with it.
This is a weird game, TJ.
Yeah, it has been a pretty weird game. This one got out of hand real quick. It looks like they are going to go for this play cleared off the board. One of these minions is very likely to stick, and in the event that it does, they just have a lethal setup, and I don't think there's a way out here for Envy and Singapore. Unless they pick up something that we're really not expecting.
No.
And Edwin Van Cleef is not that, so.
I mean, Fan of Knives? They could have sapped the Swashbuckler, eviscerated Fanned to clear out the deckhand. That would have given them another turn, maybe, but I'm not 100% sure what Singapore was going for. But it was interesting. Kept us on our toes. I liked it. Didn't work out, but
yeah. And Yunus
was kind of cool.
Throws his hands up in the air in celebration of it. What in the world is that? Puts on the mustache and the sombrero and bows his head in respect to Mexico.
If Yunus,
well done.
If Yunus could see him now.
Well played, Envy. Well played.
I was almost at a loss for words after I saw Ethereal Peddler in the opening hand. And I don't think anything that I can say would make that any better than it already was.
Yeah, I spent some time in Singapore, and I did not see any sombreros or fake mustaches in all of my travels.
Well, you can get almost anything online with like 2-day shipping.
True.
So
there's probably some on all those cargo ships that I saw outside of Singapore, though.
Probably. I mean,
they may have been
you import some sombreros.
That's
you
pretty funny,
import
though.
some computers.
I like the
don't know.
spirit, and he bowed his head. Well done.
That's very respectful.
But going to have to fight back because now Singapore with a loss. And next game's going to be Irving on the Paladin, or sorry, the Mage, and crumpled on the Paladin.
Okay. So, Control Paladin lists do have a fair amount of healing, can outlive burst from any type of Mage deck. It's more likely that it's an aggressive Paladin similar to what we saw in the last series. The Mage could be pretty much anything, but it's likely that the Mage will have some form of burn. I don't know. What's your opinion on Paladin versus Mage right now? I have to think it's probably Mage favored if it does have freeze.
It's just tough. There's, especially in global games, there's so many different archetypes of Mage at the moment. The most popular is sort of the control style Discoverer, Bird Mage. I don't even know what the name of that deck is.
They really need to nail down a name for that.
But Freeze Mage is still in the back pocket, and Secret Mage is always something that can come out.
Yeah.
And it's a deck that's definitely gaining some popularity, mostly on ladder, but a deck that's also been playing in tournaments. We mentioned earlier, Orange is playing in his top 8 list, and his list for top 8 at China versus EU. So it's a possibility as well. And also the Paladin decks vary. Even though a lot of them have similar matchups, all of a sudden if you throw a N'Zoth Paladin into the mix, which we have seen, then things just get pretty crazy. So
I mean, if the Paladin, if Singapore wants to continue with surprising us, it could be a Paladin build with, Forbidden Healing, Raglight Lord, a lot of controlling aspects that doesn't run Murlocs, in which case the Mage wouldn't really have a lot of use for early removal. Maybe the Paladin would have an easier time of shutting down early game if it is that many named Mage. It's a bunch of ifs, to be perfectly honest. We're just going to have to see what they've decided to bring.
I really want to see Secret Mage. Secret Mage, I've played a ton of games of Secret Mage this season. It's a deck that climbed Legend this season, and it was like, it felt so powerful, and I felt like I was playing something that was like unfair. I felt like I'd found something that I was
it just seems so odd.
Yeah. So
are you running like Cabal Crystal Runner? 4 secret package? What do you have?
4, yeah. Mine was 2 Counterspell, 1 Spellbender, 1 Ice Block. But, there's versions with 2 Counterspell, 2 Marinity. There's versions with 2 Counterspell, 1 Marinity, 1 Ice Block.
Are you running 1 mana, 2/1 Cabal Lackey?
No.
No? Okay, good.
I did for a little bit. I didn't like it a lot. I changed them out for Babbling Books a little bit for research generation. But I feel like I sort of pinpointed why the deck is strong. And if you look at some of the popular decks, so Mage has always been a deck that's excelled when it comes to tempo. Because with Mana Worm, with Sorcerer's Apprentice, with early game removal, it's just a deck that's always sort of naturally fit that tempo archetype.
Yeah.
And tempo is so strong right now. Decks that just go up the curve are so strong right now because of the lack of powerful 1-drops and the lack of, really powerful 2-drops that are good by themselves.
Okay, fair.
There's synergy ones like, Crackling Razor Maul, Scavenging Hyena, Rockpool Hunter that require something. And so basically at the beginning, people were like, well, there's not really many good tempo cards that were released, but players started to go back and be like, well, Kirin Mage is incredible tempo. Secrets are usually great tempo because they offer disruption and often your opponent plays unoptimally because they don't know what secret it is. So they have to sort of play around things to not disrupt their game plan. And so once you sort of, identify like Mage being strong with tempo and that, Secret sort of add that layer of tempo, it makes sense that Secret Mage is becoming strong. And if you look at sort of the powerful aggressive decks on ladder right now, they're very strong and they run very little amount of spells, but the spells that they do have are super impactful. Yeah. So you look at Aggro Druid, Savage Roar, and Living Mana. If you counterspell those, it's really good. Spike Ridge Steed and Blessing of Kings for Paladin. If you counterspell or Spellbender those, it's insane. So like it
as much as I would love to see a Cabal Lackey counterspell turn 1 into like counterspell, the Rogue Quest or the Warrior Quest.
Yeah, even Rogue Quest. Like any spell they counterspell in Rogue is huge because they rely on that planning.
They don't have a lot of spells.
Well,
they have prep.
Sometimes they can spot it coming and like prep something, which isn't like a huge waste, but then they run low on resources. But sometimes they're in a situation where they have to play the quest in a counterspell because they don't have any other spells to proc it, and they just have to hope that it's not, and you just win games from there. So it obliterates those types of decks. But this is not that deck, so I just spent that whole time explaining why Secret Mage is good, and now we get to a point where there's...
many named Mage.
Yeah, I quit. I'm out of here.
Bye, TJ. It's okay, I got this one, guys. It's going to be okay. It does look like it's a more control paladin variant. Now it looks like it's a super control paladin variant with Doomsayer in the opener as well as Equality. So it's very likely that we see Rag Light Lord as well as at least one copy of Forbidden Healing for Singapore, which means they're going to have a lot of ways to combat the burn from Mexico. Although Mexico will have a lot of ways to generate additional burn. So, I don't know. I just spent that whole time listening about Secret Mage, so I feel like I really know that deck very well now.
Mage is cool, huh, guys?
Mage is fun. Hearthstone's fun.
All right, well, there's secrets in this Mage deck, so I guess, that's,
maybe it's a Secret Mage.
That's a start.
Also, sort of.
This matchup is really interesting, just because of the fact that it's sort of a battle against value,
Yeah.
Both decks can generate so much value. The Paladin deck with Spike Ridge Steed, with Stonehill Defender, just like sort of generating minions and just making your minions bigger. While the Mage has so much flexibility with Primordial Glyphs and,
Cabal Courier.
with Cabal Courier, with sometimes Babbling Book, sometimes Cabal's Tome. They just sort of make stuff out of thin air, and a lot of times they can cater that stuff to the position on the board. But the one thing that this deck does lack is like a way to win the game if their hand doesn't pan out in the way that they need it to. So let's say you don't draw Medivh in a timely fashion, and you remove every single minion on the board and get all this value out of your cards. You don't actually have a way to win the game and turn the corner.
Yeah.
But let's say you do get to that early game and you acquire all these spells in your hand that are going to have late game value, and then you draw Medivh, and then you can make this big push. Then sometimes you can turn the corner and win. But I feel like this matchup, just the long game and the value battle and the protection against burn with the healing from Control Paladin, I feel like they have an edge.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. The Paladin does have a couple of pretty useless cards against this Mage deck. I mean, Equality Consecration, you may be able to hit, Medivh, Antonidas, Alex, but they're going to lie dead in your hand for quite a while until you find that perfect time to use them, and maybe even then they'll only kill one minion. And the Doomsayers are essentially, they're pretty dead. By the time you're able to play a Doomsayer, maybe you'll be able to kill a Medivh's Valet, but you'll probably end up killing something on your own board as well, which means that you're going to be pretty hesitant to even do that. So, I don't know. The Paladin has a very slow start. Granted, the Mage does as well, but I just don't know that it's that much of an advantage. To be fair, an advantage in Hearthstone right now, all the matchups are relatively close. One deck having an advantage might be like, 55-45, like 60-40 at best.
I guess the thing to point out, though, is this Control Paladin doesn't look like it's N'Zoth Paladin, which is kind of a big deal. N'Zoth Paladin can just have that moment in the game where it slams N'Zoth and the Mage loses.
Yeah.
As long as they haven't put on the burn. So this one might be vulnerable to say, like, they don't apply pressure because they have all these big minions in their hand. Alexstrasza comes down, and they don't have enough healing and removal to be able to deal with it and heal up, and then all of a sudden you're getting burned to the face.
I mean, I guess it's maybe possible that there's a copy of Karen and Infested Torrent and N'Zoth in this deck, but
Doubt it.
Shoop did run that to his victory at DreamHack Austin, but even he said afterwards that he picked that deck really last minute, wasn't very confident with it, and likely would have gone back and picked a different Control Paladin variant had he had time. So
he actually did surprisingly well against the Discovered Mages that we saw him. Like, that's one of the reasons why I have sort of this perception that the Paladin does well, because I've seen this matchup go late, and that it feels like the Mage can never quite get there.
Yeah.
But
it's always close, but the reach isn't quite good enough.
But this hand from Mexico, comparing it with the hand from Singapore, I mean, this is looking pretty good. They have that flexibility early on. They got through sort of the early game stages. And, if they can get to a point where they are piecing together enough burn with those big minions that their deck sort of relies on to apply pressure with Alexstrasza, Medivh, Archmage Antonidas, then they can get there. Asaki Praetorium, they're going to play this. Are they going to play it naked?
Well, yeah, it's pretty bad, but I mean, you need to start applying pressure. That's the only way you have to do it. Looking forward, you've got Curator on 7 into Light Lord or Spike Ridge on 8. You do have resources going forward, and this is a Tarim that you got off of. Actually, no, that's the only Tarim. they picked Curator off of Stonehill. Maybe it's just not quite as valuable in this matchup.
Oh, they have a second Stonehill.
They do. I think you'd pick Tyrion over Tarim, but all those are pretty bad too. Hey, Mind Blast is 5 damage.
Mind Blast is actually surprisingly good. A lot of the ways you win this matchup is just by, you know, piecing together enough burn to do so.
If your opponent expects double Fireball Frostbolt on turn 10 and plays around 15, well, surprise, double Fireball Mind Blast.
Yeah, throwing a couple more. Actually,
That's
just
17.
Just tempo it out right now. Just get him to 22. Fits the curve.
It does. I think maybe Glyph is better. I don't know.
That's potential.
It's questionable. It's possible.
Interesting.
I wouldn't say one is strictly better.
Yeah, they kind of put themselves in a tough spot here. Fireball Ping looked pretty clean, but maybe they understand how they win this, and that's by holding onto their burn.
Yeah.
But this is going to give Singapore an opportunity to start to... What? But that's a legendary.
But how can you have two?
The menagerie is for guests.
Well, one Drake is in hand for Singapore already. Oh my god.
That's a sated Threshodon.
Well, I'll be... You know how I said Stormwatcher was pretty good in Arena? Sated Threshodon is better.
Yeah, I just don't believe it. It's better. It's better and constructed. That's
maybe.
That's a weird inclusion. That
I
card.
mean, what are the usual beast inclusions? Kodo?
Kodo
or Light
is
Fuse Stegodon?
Kodo is a lot better.
Yes, but maybe you have one of each. Maybe you're always going to pick Curator off of your Stonehill defenders. So you're like, okay, I need two beasts. We got one Kodo. Don't need two Kodos. That's too many Kodos. What's another good neutral beast?
I mean, Gentle Megazord usually fills that slot because it's Murloc Paladin.
Yeah.
I guess Sated Threshodon, instead of buffing your Murlocs, why not just make Murlocs? There's got to be better beasts.
Kodo, the beast. Iron for Grizzly. I don't know, TJ. Maybe Singapore knows something we don't know.
We'll see. But Ping's just coming to the face. I mean, Mexico has amassed a lot of damage. Wow, that's good. Sign me up.
Put your faith in the light.
So let's count. Mexico has Pirate Blast, which is 10, Fireball 16, Frostbolt 19,
Mind Blast 24.
and then Medi's Valet
27.
27 with pings. Ah, they win 27.
Very good, TJ. 27 does equal 27 in this case. And Sated Threshodon won't save Singapore now, but Rag Light Lord might.
They're mousing over it. They're just taunting us.
There must be a way.
Yeah. All right, so let's look at it from the point of view of Mexico. So they have a pretty big lack of removal at the moment if they are ignoring the burn in their hand.
Yeah.
If they're thinking all of this burn that we have is going to the face. Well, then you look at it, it's like, well, we have Meteor and...
Speak to me.
They had 10 cards. And they're going to put another card in their hand. They're giving up a lot of tempo for this. Singapore's building up a gigantic board, and they're just not tearing into it at all.
I mean, Singapore's going to be able to pop block within 2 turns if Mexico doesn't have some form of freeze. They have the second block, but are they even going to have enough time to burn out Singapore if they're taking this line? Okay, what?
Well, that's a little bit of a pivot on their game plan. They pick up Firelands Portal, so that sort of replaces Fireball in the burn plan. But
Yeah, it's way more expensive.
I'm not sure what they were looking for there. Maybe they're trying to hard dig for Alex Straza because they feel like that's going to be the only way they win this matchup.
Alex or I don't
Medivh.
know, Frost Nova, if they've got one.
Yeah, I don't even
Could've
know.
bought him some
I don't even know
time.
if they do in this deck. I'm
don't
not
even
sure.
know.
Eye for an Eye is automatic in this
Yeah.
case. As soon as you pop the block and play, or as soon as you get them to 1 and play Eye for an Eye, you
It's
effectively
checkmate.
win the game. Because if they play Alex Straza, they just forego development and removal. So.
Man, I wish I could see Mexico's face right now. I mean, Jaina looks reasonably surprised, I guess.
No,
No?
disagree.
Okay. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I don't interpret emotions well, and I'm not very good at giving advice, so... You might be able to go into the major leagues, but I'll stay here.
Come back to me when you can throw a baseball to Mexico.
I can throw one to a batter a reasonable distance away.
In Mexico?
No. No, not in Mexico.
All right, well,
No.
this is top-notch meteor positioning from
It
Singapore.
is quite good.
So that's one thing that we can take a look at. But right now, Mexico just has a ton of mana worth of stuff to do in their hand, and they just can't fit it all into a turn that makes sense. And as soon as they start throwing burn at all these minions, it's just going to be harder and harder for them to eventually win the game. Right now, they have, what, 2 minions in their hand? They have a Mana Worm and a Medivh's Valet. So all of their removal or their swings onto this board have to come from the spells in their hand. And all of the big impactful ones really just don't have much in the way. They're just going to Medivh's Valet the face.
I mean, they can burn 15 on turn 10 with Pyro Mind Blast.
Yeah.
There's Infested Tauren. This is a N'Zoth Paladin, TJ.
Is that why the
That's
Sated
why the Sated
Threshodon is there?
Threshodon is there. It's a N'Zoth Paladin. Okay, it makes more sense now.
But does it?
A little bit, yes. I'm understanding a little bit more.
I mean, I guess it comes out of it comes from Curator,
It does.
and it comes back from N'Zoth.
Yeah.
So it has like double value.
That's not bad.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm buying it.
I mean, maybe you don't want to play Cairn. Maybe you just play Sated Threshodon.
Yeah.
And I guess you just pop block this turn.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
They can pop block this turn. Now it's at 4, which is a little bit of an awkward amount because all of a sudden the Eye for an Eye doesn't get quite as much value. But at this point, they just have so much pressure. They're blocking all the damage. They have healing in their hand with both True Silver Hit and with the Ragnaros Light Lord. They can probably go for it. Now, there's chances here for like lethal setups from Mexico if they like trade in to play around Rag Light Lord and start throwing burn at the face, but
They need to burn and play block this turn.
yeah, so block Mind Blast and then a Frostbolt and then a trade, and then one minion goes into the Sated Threshodon to play around Rag Light Lord to not guarantee the
I mean,
smack to the
you
face.
could throw both minions in at this point. They're not getting through. And you just need to minimize Rag Light Lord potential of hitting face.
Yeah.
But then if they deal 8 this turn, Singapore goes down to 18. They have no way of dealing 18 in one turn.
They also just have to hope that it's not Eye for an Eye. I mean, this is... They've just drawn a ton of cards this game, but they didn't really do much, and that's the issue. And they're just going to let the... All right.
I think this is pretty much just concession from Mexico.
They just let the rope burn out completely. Now they can pop the block once again. They can't do it at anything other than 4. So that's a little bit awkward, but I mean, at this point, how are they going to deal 26 damage in a single turn or 28 damage in a single turn if they attack them with a weapon? It's with an Eye for an Eye setup, they'll have to also expend mana on ping to check for Eye for an Eye, and it's not looking good.
I mean, if you glyph off the top into 3rd block, then you've got 7 mana left. Then you could Fire Lens. Then next turn you could Pyro Mind Blast. And you're
Kodo.
still 6 damage off.
All right, there's Kodo.
Yeah, there's...
A second Eye for an Eye.
It would take, like, Primordial Glyph into Kabbalist Tome, into triple Ice Block, but your hand doesn't have enough room. So you still lose.
Yep.
Can you courier for a freeze?
Yeah,
If
you
you
can carry for
get-
Frost Nova and Gluttonous Ooze, but then
Yeah.
what are you actually doing to further your win condition, you know?
Fresh from Kazan.
Let's see, Cabal Courier, Herald Volage, Meteor, and Clutch Mother.
Zavas.
Sure. Yeah, this is just nothing.
Okay. Play it.
Should just see a concession here out of Mexico. I don't think they can even live to this turn.
Well done.
There it is.
No Herald Volage.
No
All right.
Herald Volage. All right, Singapore takes it.
Tied series. 1-1. You know what? The Threshodon makes sense. I'm going through it. I see the lines, TJ. It makes sense with N'Zoth in the deck.
I mean, I said earlier on that this still could be N'Zoth Paladin. That
Yeah.
N'Zoth Paladin can have that, you know, they slam N'Zoth later in the game, and the mage hasn't got to the point where they can win with burn, then it's just game lights out. But I was not expecting the stated threshold.
Yep.
I mean, it actually makes a lot of sense. It comes from Curator, so you can pick
Yeah.
up an additional beast if you draw either Kodo or the Threshodon before the point where you play Curator. You get that beast.
I see it sort of fitting the spot of Karen, except you can search it. So, I mean, maybe it's just better in this case?
Well, Karen is better than, say, Threshodon, but you don't get it from Curator.
No, you don't.
So, it's tough. But Singapore, it feels like they have some interesting deck choices.
Yeah,
But
that's for sure.
I mean, they got the job done with that one. So we'll see what else they have in store for us. And next game, we're actually going to
Oh.
see a Shaman Mirror matchup.
You said you wanted to see some shamans, TJ. Here we go.
Not two at the same time. I guess I didn't specify that.
They're overcompensating for no shamans in the last match. Either way, Empanizado and Aaron are both going to be bringing shaman decks, and something tells me I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Singapore isn't just bringing a standard elemental shaman.
No, I mean, I feel like standard Shaman at this point in competitive play has become some type of control Spirit Echo Shaman. It's the deck that had the most success at DreamHack Austin out of all of the Shaman decks that were present.
Yeah, Strife Crow brought something very
Yeah.
similar to it.
And outside of that tournament, we haven't, in global games, we just haven't seen much Shaman in general. It's got a lot of even matchups across the board, but when you're building decks for tournament play, a lot of times you don't necessarily want even matchups across the board. You want like some positive matchups and very little bad matchups. So Shaman also is pretty vulnerable to some of the most popular decks in the format right now, including Quest Rogue.
That's true.
So it sort of forces you into a situation where you have to ban, and there's better decks that fit that slot. But now Global Games is 9-deck format. You got to bring Shaman at least somewhere. And if you're afraid that your other decks aren't going to match up well against your opponents too, then Shaman needs to be the choice. And
Yeah.
I feel like Control Shaman is a little bit better equipped for specific matchups than Elemental Shaman is, while Elemental Shaman is better across the board.
Yeah, that's true. It's maybe a little bit more consistent, but also inconsistent in the same vein as the nature of the deck requires a prerequisite for the cards to actually get to do much of anything at all. So Control Shaman it has a job, and it does the job well if the other deck allows it to. So maybe you just take the higher win rate percentage against certain decks and sacrifice that consistency across the board with elementals. You play something a little bit more one note, I guess, is how you could describe the Control Shaman.
Yeah, I've been brewing up some Shaman decks.
You've been home brewing some Shaman decks.
Yeah, I've been heading down to my basement.
Stirring up the pot with Shaman decks.
First heading to the
Little volcano here,
First heading to the field and harvesting my Shaman hops.
of course.
And then
Authentic Shaman hops.
Yes.
Thrall hops.
yeah,
Or Morgul hops.
adding some orange Shaman zest
Ooh, citrusy.
and really just going for
Hints of chocolate.
going to my Shaman microbrewery, which is in San Diego, like all other microbreweries,
Standard stuff, really.
and brewing up a good old Shaman IPA.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah,
Really. You could retails for like a fair amount for a 6-pack. You sell them in 12?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, $300. That's how much it costs.
For a shaman brew.
But yeah, I've been trying out some types of like elemental shamans, and seeing how I can get away with playing as little elementals as possible while still holding on to like some control packages. And
Yeah.
I could say right now I'm not it's not going well.
The deck just feels
But it has,
awkward. It feels so awkward to me.
Yeah, it does have some good matchups though, which is you know, the key there. It can do well against a lot of Paladin builds. And I feel like, you know, that's one of the big counters, but it's very vulnerable to a lot of other decks too.
Yeah.
If you get AoE early on, it's also good against Druid, but they can blow you out of the water. It feels like it's inconsistent, and that's one of its biggest weaknesses. And looks like we are going to see a couple of Spirit Echo Jade decks, and buckle up. This is going to be a long one.
Be here for a while. If anybody wants to take a bathroom break, I'd recommend now. You know how when you go to concerts, there's always a P song? It's like a song that they play from the album that like nobody really likes that much, but it's just kind of there. You kind of forget about it. The first 7 turns of this are going to be the P song.
I had never heard of that
You've
concept
never heard
before
of that
this.
before?
No.
Yeah, it's the song in the concert that is on the album that they're promoting, but like it's not a single, it's not a hit, it's just kind of there. That's the first 7 turns of this matchup. They're just kind of there. And then the good stuff gets rolling after that.
Do they label it on their albums?
No.
Like you're going through, it's
No,
like, okay.
I'm pretty sure they give it a title.
Like song 1, song 2.
And they try to make it a thing.
Song 3, and then in parentheses, it's like P song. And you're like, oh, okay.
No.
That's the P song.
I can't think of a good example of it.
What if I just...
But it's definitely a thing.
I'm gonna write an album, okay?
'Kay.
That's what I'm gonna do.
Shaman songs?
It's gonna be shaman songs. And
Tunes for the spirited Murloc?
there's gonna be one song that's called the P song, but it's gonna be the hit
Best
single of the
song
album.
of the album.
And so, out of the 6 people in the world that know what a P song is, they're gonna be so thrown off by it.
You're here for 1 week,
They're
and
gonna-
you're
they're gonna be like-
challenging everything I've ever known.
They're gonna be like, "Whoa, this P song is really good," or maybe they'll just never hear it because they'll always be peeing. The lesson we've learned here is that when you're watching Hearthstone, never go pee.
Unless you're
Because the
playing
P
on
song
mobile
has the
devices.
potential to be really good.
If you're playing on a mobile device, by all means, do what you gotta do. Don't drop it in the toilet. Because then they're gonna charge you $175 for a replacement, even if it's under warranty.
All right, well, getting into this match, we've only missed 2 turns.
What's happened in those 2 turns, TJ?
So we've gotten a totem up and we've gotten 2 Jade Claws played. So
Yeah, we have.
basically how this matchup works is whoever gets the most value out of Spirit Echo first wins. And at the moment, I have no idea. Thing from Below is actually really good because Thing from Below is, you know, in a matchup where a lot of the times there's a lot of totemic calling being done. You can, you know, make Thing from Below incredibly cheap and then play that, you know, for like 1 mana or even free, and then play Spirit Echo where you're getting a lot more value out of it.
It's like if you two were playing a set and they were to play anything, like the first 4 songs are from the Joshua Tree, they're really good hits, and then they play anything off of that album that they gave everybody for free. That nobody ever listened to because it showed up on their
Are you
their
still
devices,
trying to argue for the P song?
and they didn't want to listen to it. That's this first 7 turns. That's
Okay.
this matchup.
All right, well, it's actually heating up now because the Jade Spirit was played, and now there's a Maelstrom Portal picked up. Those 2 things aren't
All right, so
necessary.
we're at the spicy bridge.
Yeah,
It's heating up.
but so
It's a little different than before.
So this one's pretty interesting because this matchup, because you sort of have to play a little bit against your instincts, your normal Hearthstone instincts, and sort of like not play to like try and build up a board. You're playing to just make one explosive board. Because if you play one thing at a time, you're never going to get to the point where you get enough value from Spirit Echo to make it worth it and to win the game. So there's going to be a lot of turns where these players are, or these teams are both going to be trying to do the absolute minimum in order to deal with the board, in order to try and make a better turn for Spirit Echo. So that's why like Thing from Below is probably not going to be played until it's can be played with Spirit Echo for a very
0
cheap
mana
cost.
and get a bunch of them.
Even things like Hot Spring Guardian, like you have 3 extra mana, you just totem up, but your opponent didn't develop anything. So why play Hot Spring Guardian? It feels unintuitive when you look at Hearthstone from the outside, but it's sort of how you have to play this matchup, because you're never going to win this matchup by just building up like a medium size, like a board full of medium-sized threats in the mid game. You're never going to win the matchup by doing that. You're going to win the matchup by by trying to stabilize the board and then eventually making a board full of medium-sized stuff that goes back to your hand when it dies. And so, and then eventually just keep making boards full of bigger and bigger stuff. And so it's just a little bit unintuitive from what a lot of players are used to normally playing Shaman, where you're trying to remove the board and slowly build something up.
It's like a game of chicken. Who's gonna pull the trigger first, build the first board, and is it gonna be enough?
Yeah, it's like a game of P-Song.
Yes. You're absolutely right, DJ. It very much is. And if only both of these decks had a card called Totem Slam. Wouldn't that be cool, TJ?
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, this is one of those turns. So, hey, well, normally I'd just, hey, totem up and thing from below. Cool. But no, not in this matchup. Not this time, Batman. Ooh, this is actually... So Sogoth the Slither is actually...
That's fantastic.
It's hard to deal with.
If you Volcano, it's not guaranteed that it dies, but you can't also kill it with anything else.
Yeah.
These not spells.
Earth Elemental, though, lets you more easily fit it in with Spirit Echo.
So what's more valuable?
I don't know. That's still a tough one. They went with Sogoth, but I still think that's a tough decision. I like that they took their time on that one because while Sogoth is the obvious choice, it jumps out at you when you first see it. Earth Elemental does have some merit because it's a big minion that you can get out. But say Sogoth sticks around for a turn, you can Spirit Echo
if there's even a small chance that you get a second copy of Sogoth, it
can't be hexed. So that's one thing. Hex does get rid of the Spirit Echo as well. So Singapore actually picked up Wrathion from their Stonehill Defender, so a much weaker choice, but one that's going to come out earlier on in the game. See? So unintuitive.
Yeah.
You want to play Aya here at 6 mana.
You can't do it.
But this is just better to Volcano and reset.
At what point do you want to Volcano? Are you trying to kill off one large minion or just a small board of crappy stuff that doesn't do anything?
Or here do you just Totem Pass? That's okay. There's 3 damage on the board.
I mean, it looks scary, but they're not playing Bloodlust.
Yeah, Aya is not necessarily the best play here. Because Spirit Echo is sort of stranded in your hand. Yeah, out of the 6 mana cards, I like Wrathion better.
Yeah.
Because Aya with Spirit Echo is incredible. So
does it get to the point where can you just play Aya and Spirit Echo on turn 9 and feel confident that that's a good enough Spirit Echo? You have 2 copies.
Probably not, but it's okay. I mean, if that's all you have on your board, but a lot of times you're going to have other stuff too.
Do you want to Spirit Echo totems?
Not usually, because it fills up your hand.
But is there a way that you can actually avoid that?
Like getting a Wrath of Air totem is actually pretty good because totems actually when they come back to your hand, they're cheaper.
Crystalline Oracle nets Empanizado a Lightning Storm, which would potentially be a full clear here.
Yeah.
And wouldn't expend any other resources. This has all just come from the Maelstrom portal.
Decent rolls. Totem up and call it a day.
Get that healing totem. Heal that defender back up. Yeah, taunt's good too.
And now we're back to square one.
All right, so it's turn 7. You guys are probably all back from the bathroom by now. Got a glass of water. Maybe some popcorn.
Warriors come out to play.
A couple of wings. Back in your comfy chair.
Did somebody say wings?
You hungry, TJ?
That's the thing about me, Cora. I'm always hungry. All right, so now we're starting to get to the points of the matchup where you start to think about when I'm going to Spirit Echo. You also have to start thinking about, could we have played a different Shaman deck?
Yeah. I don't know that you want to think about that right now, but maybe after the game's over,
Yeah.
you could definitely consider it. I mean, both teams have access to a Spirit Echo in hand, so they do
Ooh.
need to be figuring out when is the time to pull.
I don't know if I like that thing.
You could have saved that thing and had an extra thing. It's 2 things.
Yeah.
You know what they say, 2 things are better than 1.
But they did have to play something because they would have overdrawn with Mana Tide
Oh,
Totem.
TJ. Devolve on a Spirit Echoed board.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good.
So this matchup is insane.
This is even grindier than pre-Ungoro Jade Shaman mirrors.
Yeah.
Where both decks were running two Devolves, 2 Storms, 2 Portals, 2 Hexes, and they just did nothing
Yeah.
forever.
Yeah.
This
so
is even more grindy than that.
It is. It is. Now we're getting to the point where these volcanoes are going to have to start being considered, just because we're starting to get to the point of the game where, you know, leaving stuff on board that it has high impact can be a liability, because, you know, you don't know that your opponent's not going to Spirit Echo the next turn. Killing off that thing from below is incredibly important because you don't want to give a free one back. But it's all about, you know, how you're going to manage it in the end. And all right, first Spirit Echo of the game is going to be used, and it's reasonably valuable. Getting a Jade Chieftain and a couple of Jades is actually pretty good, and they use a Jade Lightning as well, so they're going to start ramping up.
This was actually a great call by Singapore.
I do
the
like
board
it.
didn't seem that incredibly impactful, but to be able to get the Jade Chieftain in hand right away to prevent Hex or
Yep.
Devolve on the Chieftain to get that immediate refund is very valuable. And just to kill the Mana Tide Totem as well. That's you absolutely need to remove Mana Tide Totem from the board. It just nets too much value.
Well, to be honest, they probably could have left it up just because
You can
having
threat the overdraw, I guess.
not only threaten the overdraw, but make it so they're less likely to want to use Spirit Echo because they don't want to put a bunch of stuff back in their hand only to have cards in their deck be discarded. Especially if the stuff that's on the board that's Spirit Echoed is totems, which you can't necessarily always trade off to avoid that.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Well, that was pretty good.
Save themselves some damage.
About the best you can expect from a Maelstrom Portal there.
They're starting to run out of value a little bit though. That's the problem.
Just look at the resource battle here. Singapore has an additional Chieftain as well as Aya in hand. And Mexico has Saugeth. That's about it.
Yeah. So both Aya and Jade Chieftain build up the Jades a little bit. Aya is almost always going to get a Hex out of
Yeah.
your opponent in this situation just to stop the Jades from ramping up even more. But I think Aya plus the 3-mana Jade is reasonable enough. Let's see what else they could go for. They could go for Aya plus the Jade Claws. That actually puts more power on the board. I kind of like that a little bit better.
Gives you
Or
5/5 and 6/6.
Jade
You can clear off
Chieftain-
the 2/2.
Jade Chieftain plus Jade Claws in that situation I think might be a little bit better because then you could try and bait out the Hex on a smaller target and then work towards getting Aya down and having it stick to get the Jades building even more.
Yeah, if you bait the Hex on the 6/6 Golem, then it's possible Aya
Ah,
sticks.
screw it. Volcano.
Yeah, why not? You've got a pair of those.
Yeah, you also void, you know, the Spirit Echo from your opponent, and Jade Claws plus the Hero Power is going to be it. They are limiting themselves on mana a little bit for the next turn, but
Yeah.
that's not too big of an issue because they'll still be able to just play a Jade Behemoth if they want to. They'll be have 3 Overloaded Crystals with 10 mana total, so they'll still have the 7 mana to be able to play Chieftain.
And Mexico picks up another not impactful minion.
Yeah, and they can't coin out Sogoth here, or play Sogoth here, just because they're overloaded from the, what was it?
Jinyu.
Jinyu and Jade Claws from the previous turn, so not going to be able to do that. I feel like the Hero Power plus pass turn is not really too enticing to me.
Is there anything else that you can afford to do, though? I don't know, playing out the 0 mana thing from below, it did empty their hand enough so that they wouldn't burn a card, but they did still have access to the coin. What it did also was mean that Singapore can immediately get value off of Spirit Echo on the Jade Chieftain and deny Mexico that additional 0 mana 5/5 taunt off of their own Spirit Echo were it to activate.
Yeah.
Came back to bite them a little bit.
This just looks like it's going to be a big value train from Singapore. I mean, they just have already so many resources in their hand. Mexico's relying on, like, Sogoth to do a lot of work for them. Devolve plus Volcano is going to have to do a lot of work for them just because that's their only sort of board clear left. And they're starting to run low. They have so much Jade potential.
How much do you want to play at one time?
I think this is fair enough. Because they're still holding on to Jade Chieftain and Aya to be able to reload, even if this board is clear. There is 8 plus 9, so 17 total health on the board. So Volcano doesn't clear it all itself, but Volcano plus a hit from the Jade Claws is a full clear. So they could hit the 2/3 and then Volcano and it's a full clear. And then they can develop on their own. I actually like that. They hit Volcano and then start developing. That's a pretty big swing for them.
You can Volcano and develop
Jade Spirit.
Jade Spirit behind it. Their Jades aren't very large yet, but, I mean, you have to get it going at some point. It's the best time as any. Means that your Jade Lightning's stronger next turn, and you have to pick up your own Jade Chieftain and your own Aya at some point.
Yeah, 3 3s. Gross. Their Jades are tiny.
I think Singapore's are at 7/7 now.
Yeah. 7/7 is going to be the next one, I believe.
The differential between hand value and Jade size right now it's all in favor of Singapore.
So let's say they might probably have a second Spirit Echo left in their deck. So I don't think they want to go for anything from below just yet. Because that's, you know, an easy way to get another free minion from Spirit Echo, essentially. And sort of just going to go with the medium ground with Jade Chieftain. They still are a little bit reluctant to play Aya just because they want Hex to be used before they play it, or at least one of the Hexes to be used before they play it. So I understand. We'll see just how slow they decide to take it, though. Eventually, we're going to get to the point where the Jades get big enough to, if Mexico doesn't remove them immediately, they're just going to die the following turn from just board damage. And that's eventually how this matchup is going to play out.
It's getting harder and harder for them to remove them.
And Spirit Echo could be a possibility here. If they go with Jinyu plus Spirit Echo. Oh, there's a Hex.
Means that Aya... well, at least that Singapore will think that Aya is that much safer.
Slightly safer.
Devolve still deals with her quite nicely, and there's still a second Hex for Mexico, but maybe you feel brave enough now. And the Wrath of Air roll was quite big for Mexico.
Another Stonehill defender. That's 2. Picking up a thing from below would be okay, but still no second Spirit Echo for them.
That's really what they're looking for here. They're running out of value.
Well, not quite yet, but they will if this game goes long, which of course it will.
I mean, just looking at the way the removal lines up, Singapore needs to play Aya at some point. Mexico then has Devolve. It's going to keep going back and forth for a while still. But eventually, Singapore will need to find resources. Whereas Mexico is still going to be drawing into high-value Jades, Singapore already has gotten them.
Yeah. This might be a perfect time for a Sogoth, though. Because that bad boy's not getting removed. Ooh, White Eyes.
Ooh.
Wait, Giant Mastodon. The last of its kind.
No, TJ, that's the Kaleidosaur.
Oh.
You don't see that card played either.
Oh, Thing from Below. I'm surprised that they... I'm surprised that they play. I guess they don't have the Spirit Echo in their hand, or maybe they don't even have a second one in their deck.
Man, their deck's getting really thin. I mean, just look at the difference between deck sizes. Mexico still has significantly more cards in deck. If they're able to just run Singapore out of resources, they will win.
Yeah, but they're running low themselves. So let's say they play Sogoth here. It doesn't get challenged on the board, but any AoE would challenge it. And Devolve actually can hit it as well, so
Yeah.
They can't guarantee that it's going to live, and it is going to come down. So now Singapore has to make the decision, well, can we afford to devolve this? Do we have to wait for a Spirit Echo turn? Or can we just trade everything in and Lightning Storm this down in order to, save the devolve for a threatening wide board instead of just a single minion?
I mean, Singapore hasn't seen really any significant board of Jades, and they also haven't seen a Spirit Echo board. I think Devolve, you're really waiting to hit a board that has been echoed.
Sure, yeah.
And if you give up your Devolve, I mean, maybe you don't have a second copy. Maybe you don't feel like you have the liberty of doing that when you've used both Volcanoes.
Yeah. And it looks like they are just going to trade in the old-fashioned way, trade in all these minions and Lightning Storm it down. And White Eyes is probably going to be the choice, or else they probably would have totemed up there to maybe save one of their minions. But I guess they can...
You could Golem as well.
Yeah, I guess they can save the Stonehill Defender. Tortellini.
I also call it a tortellini. I imagine it's just an Italian turtle.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is getting quite rough for Mexico now.
You've seen one Spirit Echo from Singapore. Devolving White Eyes essentially takes a 10-10 out of the equation as well.
That's a pretty big deal, but then also you don't get to be put in a situation where you can devolve a big board. It's the same case. And will Singapore play around Devolve by, say, not playing Aya into a board with White Eyes on it? Because then that gives them a really good Devolve board. Just going to go with the Jinyu Water Speaker, and I don't think this is a valuable enough board to Spirit Echo on. And we're just going to continue down the same path where just not really playing much, but nobody's really getting closer to a win. One day. One day.
One of these teams will win this game. And we'll go to game 4.
Didn't roll Spell Power Totem so they could trade over the Stonehill Defender with the Jade Lightning. You don't want to hex the Jinyu Water Speaker, I don't think. I mean, there's a possibility that you could, since you have 2 hexes and you know that your opponent's running low on resources and you have the Devolve. So actually, no, on second thought, maybe you can.
But why do you want to?
Just
I guess is my
to sort of
question.
keep the minions on board healthy and not have to develop any more minions.
I think you'd be happy if your White Eyes died at this point, though.
True.
So
Yeah.
even just a Jinyu running in and a Storm from Mexico, you're fine with that.
Yeah.
I'd be really surprised if there wasn't a second Spirit Echo for Singapore. They played that first one very quickly. It seemed like the liberal use was banking on the fact that there was a second one.
Yeah, I think there's got to be, and maybe that's what they're waiting for the Aya for, but they also have to keep in the back of their mind that there's probably a Devolve in the deck.
Mm-hmm.
So is this a big enough turn for Mexico to go for the Spirit Echo of their own? They'll just get a Jade Spirit, a Totem, and a Jinyu Water Speaker. I mean, at this point, it's slim pickings. They actually roll Spell Power Totem, so this could be a pretty good clear on the board, but they have to start developing minions of their own. I mean, I guess they can Lightning Storm, trade off whatever's left.
And
Hope
then
they roll.
Spirit
Hope they roll
behind
4s on
it.
the 4 health minions and then Spirit behind it. That's a possibility. But then all of a sudden, if their board gets cleared, then they have nothing to Spirit Echo. Absolutely
You
nothing.
could also run in Jinyu, Hot Spring Guardian the Jinyu, and then save Jade Spirit for the same turn you Spirit Echo.
Yeah.
This just develops a bigger board, though. Maybe at some point you just have to hope your opponent doesn't have removal. You've
Yeah.
seen both Volcanoes.
Still no second Spirit Echo.
Turn 23. Both players still above 20 health. Will the game ever end? Yet to be seen.
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think anybody's going to win.
They're both too hesitant to play any cards and hit face.
But at the end of the day, we all win because it's Hearthstone. All right, well, Singapore is like, well, we're kind of fed up.
I'm a little bit annoyed with this. Maybe I'll just go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this board is not as vulnerable to devolve because Aya will, even though you won't get that extra Jade value, will still become a 5-drop, which some 5-drops can be pretty impactful.
Gotta have some removal behind it to be able to clear off an 8-drop, a 7-drop, and 5-drop. Oh!
Oh, no.
Oh! Oh!
Anomalous is not the best. I mean, there might be a point where they hex their own Anomalous just to prevent shenanigans. All right, so... Oh, man. Where do they go from here?
There's no way that you can directly kill Anomalous this turn because the Grime Street Protector's in the way.
Well, they can bump over both of the other minions. And that Golem's going to be pretty impactful, but at this point, Mexico has almost no minions left. And as we're getting closer to the end of the game, would you really want a Spirit Echo like a Manatide Totem? Is that really something that you'd want to do?
I mean, they still got Aya in deck, I believe.
Yeah.
So I guess whenever you pick that up, you just echo it. Their Jades are 7/7s now.
Yeah, I mean, Singapore just had so many turns where they really didn't do much that, aside from the last one, but it got devolved, that Mexico actually was able to catch up in Jades, which I wasn't expecting to happen.
No, I mean, it was like 3/3 to 7/7 at one point.
Yeah, and this hand from Singapore is just not good. It really isn't. Devolving this board doesn't do much. You know, trading into this board also doesn't do much, and you just give your opponent full initiative unless you want to develop a thing from below by itself onto a board without Spirit Echoing it. It's this is the most attrition-y battle that I may have ever seen in my 3 years, maybe even more, of casting Hearthstone.
Well, savor it. That's just about the only time you're going to see Anomalous in competitive play.
Probably. Thing from below. Well, I mean, I think you just got to go for it, right?
Yeah. I mean, you're ahead on cards in deck.
I mean, you can Manatide Totem and wait one more turn. Maybe that's the play.
Manatide Hero Power wait.
Manatide Hero Power wait.
You're not worried about overdrawing.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually a legitimate option. Because at this point, but then, I mean, you're always worried about devolve. It's like, well.
I mean, yeah. Yeah, you kind of know what your opponent has in hand or has left in deck. You haven't seen either hacks. You haven't seen devolves.
Yeah.
You can start to pinpoint that if they haven't developed anything, they probably don't have second Spirit Echo, and they don't have minions.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody win this game, TJ? I don't know.
I mean, I think they have a little bit more cards left in their deck than Singapore does, so they're a little bit ahead in that regard when it comes to fatigue. So I think they can afford to play Manatide Totem, but you do have to put some thought into it because Singapore can get to a point where they just don't kill it, and then you're drawing a little bit too many cards.
Manatides could just even the game up.
Wow, they're actually just not even playing Spirit Echo. Maybe they're hoping for a devolve now?
Try to bait it. Hope that Singapore only has one copy. You know they still have 2 hexes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just non-negotiable.
Man, this is... So they can opt to just hex the thing from below now to deny that value. or they can wait a turn just to go for a bigger devolve plus Maelstrom Portal clear. Singapore's trying to think, well, what threats do they have left in their deck? Probably Jade Chieftain, Aya. They do have quite a bit of top end still left in those last bit of cards.
Good Jade value left for Mexico and pretty much nothing except another copy of Spirit Echo.
Yeah.
And removal for Singapore.
Yeah.
White Eyes died, right?
White Eyes died. There's
so
a
there's a
10/10
Storm
in the deck.
Guardian in the deck as well. Hair Power Pass. There's a Jade Chieftain.
Yeah, that's got to be a Spirit Echo now, I feel. You just have to, I guess, hope that they don't... I mean, if Devolve's going to come out, maybe they can try and go for a Spirit Echo on this board, bait out Devolve, and then hope for another Spirit Echo later on, but...
Or just try to get some value off the Jade Chieftain by itself, because then you still have Aya to follow up. This entire matchup is, all right, can I bait Hex on this minion so that this minion lives? Can I bait Devolve on this board so that this board lives? So many mind games.
I just don't know anymore. This one is just really tough. If you think that you're going to be able to win the resource battle, then you're just not going to play anything and just pass over the turn in hero power.
I mean, maybe that's just right.
Force your opponent to act before you play the Spirit Echo, so that way maybe you're forcing out Devolves before your Spirit Echo even comes out, so that your opponent can play it out. And, I mean, even if this board gets devolved, can it be devolved and removed?
You may have to waste Devolve plus Hex or multiple Hexes in the same turn.
I actually kind of like holding on to the Spirit Echo here, because that just means that if they know Devolve is going to come out anyway, then why play it? Just save it till later on. Because this board is still just really tough to deal with on its own. Even if it devolves, you're still getting 6-drop, 5-drop.
What if Mexico never actually intended to play Spirit Echo and only put it in their deck for this fringe opportunity that it is simply a threat and they never actually wanted to play it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very unlikely possibility.
But you do say it's possible.
But hey, we've talked about everything else we could possibly talk about in this
So
matchup.
we got to find something else to talk about. Seen any good movies lately, TJ?
No.
Okay, well, we've exhausted that resource, just like both of these teams have exhausted almost literally every resource in their deck.
Yeah, still the Storm Guardian left for Singapore somewhere in that deck, but it's going to be met swiftly by a Hex. Oh, wow.
Grook Fu Master.
That barely took any power off the board. They might have to use a second Devolve, and that may be what Mexico was hoping for. Now Spirit Echo all of a sudden becomes, what in the world?
God.
And now they Spirit Echo this board. Both Devolves are gone, and that's basically game over. That was actually a pretty genius move, not Spirit Echoing earlier.
Whew. That's pretty good.
Yeah, they were expecting the Devolve. Of course, you sort of have to in these controlling matchups, and if you're expecting to Devolve, there's absolutely no point in playing Spirit Echo.
If you build up a large enough board that is kind of resistant to Devolve, best case scenario, this happens. You pull 2 and you still have a significant amount of damage on board.
Yeah, and now they can Aya and Spirit Echo and just making room. Or just stick with the status quo and maybe try and force out a Hex before you play Aya.
They might still have another Spirit Echo in deck as well.
Yeah.
So maybe you'd rather have this board as well as an Aya board.
Yeah. No, I kind of like this, because Aya sort of goes all in on one minion. There's no reason to do that when you know that 2 Hexes are left. So force him to Hex a target that's not necessarily a great Hex target, and they put themselves in a little bit of a better position. I like the way that Mexico's played this game as it's gone on. Because now they can get a ton of value, and all of a sudden if double Hexes are used, they drop Aya and it's unanswerable.
I really wonder if Singapore maybe, and stay with me here, as crazy as this sounds, took this game a little bit too fast.
It is possible.
They were the first to develop. They put Mexico in the reactive position the entire time. But once they were out of resources and were left with only things to react to, Mexico was able to dictate the pace.
Yeah.
And Singapore was pushed into that uncomfortable position.
But at some point, somebody's got to go. But maybe you're right. Maybe they, I don't know, use things too early. Maybe they shouldn't have used a Spirit Echo. Maybe they should have waited on until Devolve was used. It's hard for me to see a way that Singapore plays this game differently, moving back.
Just
moving
looking
back
at the
to
way
it.
that their hand shaped up.
Yeah.
They drew what I thought, at least, was well.
Yeah. But it felt like Mexico made a pretty good situation out of something that was
looked
incredibly tough. Yeah.
Tentacle of N'Zoth.
And just end turn. Yikes.
Wow.
So Mexico is not really close to lethal here, and Singapore is still holding on to those hexes because they know what comes at them as soon as they use these hexes. And again, Mexico can just take it slow. They have an obvious resource advantage because they were able to get sort of the upper hand with the Spirit Echoes. So they don't have to go all in here.
They didn't even have to play anything.
Yeah, I think you want to play something just to pressure, but you're right. They didn't have to play anything. More AoE just being drawn. I mean, this is very likely a board clear. Well, not like very likely, because that 5 health could be a little bit out, but if they roll spell power totem, it is.
I mean, now you've seen most of the Spirit Echoed resources come back down on board. Do you feel like you're able to hex this Tar Lurker and save your other hex for Aya? But there's still likely to be another Chieftain in deck, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like Aaron has been holding these hexes for a very long time with those cards in mind.
I think at some point,
There's little time.
you're going to have to hex a minion that you didn't want to hex. Because you can't just keep waiting. I feel like you can't just keep waiting. Because let's say Aya comes down next turn. Well, I don't know, because then you need to hex the Jade. This just seems like a lose-lose situation all the way around. If you don't hex, you just take so much damage.
This entire game...
They just hero-powered past.
Oh my god, Hella Zeal in hand as well. This entire game, you know when you say a word so much that you start to question like why that word is what it is and why it sounds how it sounds, then you start to like really overthink everything and it just becomes dumb. This entire game feels like I'm just questioning life right now in general.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen so much Shaman in the last 45 minutes maybe? I don't even know. I'm questioning the Shaman class as a whole.
I think this game has lasted longer than the entire first series of the day.
I mean,
It's definitely possible that that's the case, but I mean, at this stage, Singapore,
it's going to be wrapped up pretty quickly, I think.
yeah,
Hopefully.
they are going to have to deal with the board this turn. They don't have a choice because they're dead, staring at the board. Manatee Totem does not help at
That's
all
dead.
with the current state of the game. So,
I mean, that's admirable, and I had about a 45 minute long Jade Shaman mirror.
now that's
in
admirable.
Tespa. Now that was a long game, but I think this is longer. I think maybe you and I have worked with That's Admirable the most out of
But separately.
any casters recently. Yes, but separately. Now you get him out of the picture, and here we are, TJ.
Yeah. Oh, this could be a full clear. Nope.
So +1/+1 on Halaziel.
They're running out of stuff. Again, still a Storm Guardian left in the deck, still at 10-10, but there has been no targets for Mexico to even hex.
I mean, I really am assuming right now that Singapore has like 2 cards left in their Spirit Echo and Storm Guardian.
Yeah, they have very little resources left. It's just going to be really hard. You can see Aaron just scratching his head. He's just like, I just don't even know. If I play the Stick for Bullet, it just gets killed.
It's like I'm adding up 2 and 2, and they're equaling 5, and I don't think that it can happen.
Well, there's the Storm Guardian. Wow, running out of cards for Mexico, and Acolyte of Pain is pretty useless, but I mean, it doesn't matter. They can just trade the Hallows Alien and just build up a big board. They can just Tortellini Shellmaster and Tarlunker.
And the Selfish Hero.
Yeah. Those 3 cards just all in a row. Use their Spirit Echo minions that they got. And probably just get close to winning the game on the following turn. They still have Aya, which there's double Hex waiting for it, but that's it. I wonder what it's the last card of Jade Chieftain from Mexico.
Or is it a second copy of Spirit Echo?
Or is it a second copy of Spirit Echo?
We did see 2 Jinyus and an Acolyte from Mexico. Singapore, we only saw 1 Jinyu, 2 Manatides, obviously no Acolyte. So there are some card-for-card differences between the 2 decks. If you Guardian and Echo...
They know there's a second Hex, and they know that all of the cards are there because the last card of the deck is being drawn the next turn.
Yeah.
So Singapore has to know that this is going to get Hexed. And so they're not going to even Spirit Echo because it's just doubling up on a minion that they're 100% sure is going to get Hexed. And the last card is... Volcano. Whoa. That's weird.
Okay, so we did see 2 from Singapore.
I mean...
So...
This
2
is...
Manatides, Acolyte, no Chieftains. Singapore was just running a heavier Jade build.
This is actually possible that Singapore can win. So let's say this gets hexed. So it's going to get hexed, and they're going to push, what, 4 damage to the face, most likely? And then the Aya plus the Jade get hexed, okay? And then they Jinyu Water Speaker back up. They're only staring at a little bit of cards. Jade Chieftain is in the bottom of their deck.
You can... Okay, so double Hex Jinyu. You clear off the 2 frogs, and then you have Jade Chieftain follow up.
I don't... Yeah, I think Singapore might just turn the corner. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore.
Mexico still has Volcano and Devolve. But if Singapore can kill all of their resources, they win the game.
Yeah, and I just thought that Mexico had more threats in the bottom of their deck, but they just didn't. But they're hitting fatigue.
You got to get rid of that Manatide somehow, or Singapore is going to draw themselves to death.
And they're just going to go face. They're going to take a point of fatigue next turn. So let's see. They're going to be able to put up a big taunt, but it's going to get devolved.
They're going to take...
They can heal back up and Spirit Echo, but again, it's going to get devolved.
And they're taking 5 from the 2 and the 3 that they're drawing with the Manatide and the natural draw. So they need to Hot Spring Guardian this turn.
Ah, they're dead.
No, they still lose. If they didn't have the Manatide on board, though, they'd still lose.
Yeah.
Because Mexico could just devolve and hit face. Okay, so they still lose. But the last 30 seconds...
They got a little bit exciting when I saw the double hex, but Singapore realizes... Aaron gives a sad face, thinking that is an hour of my life that I'm never getting back.
You know what? He tried so hard.
And got so far.
And in the end, they still lost.
I mean, we learned a lot about the Spirit Echo Shaman versus Spirit Echo Shaman mirror matchup.
I don't think I could have played that matchup, 10 times and learned as much as I just did.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I feel like we also didn't learn anything about Spirit Echo Shaman mirror matchup.
I learned that I am hesitant to ever play it.
Yeah, I mean, so when you're playing that deck against other decks besides the mirror matchup, it's really interesting because you find these intricate battles of, when can you Spirit Echo, when do you need a Spirit Echo, but in the mirror, there's so many transform effects. There's double Devolve, there's double Hex, that it feels like Spirit Echo never really gets much value, and in that regard, I feel like Singapore sort of understood and realized they needed to get value immediately. But at the end of the day, it just came down to, you know, who could be like Singapore just not drawing resources or not drawing stuff to put on the board to try and bait out hexes for a long period of time in the mid game. And then by the time that they, you know, could try and come back on the board, it was too late, and they had already taken too much damage and drawn too many cards, and they just were dead in fatigue. So, but Mexico on match point now. It's going to be up to Epsilon, and she's going to be taking on Sequinox. It's going to be Priest versus Priest. Oh, God.
All right, I feel like I could really use a mid-match stretch, but I'm ready for this. Any other class right now. Give me a different class. Priest it is. We got 2 of them. I'm just really hoping it's not a control priest mirror. I think you probably are too. But
well,
even a dragon priest mirror can get lengthy.
Yeah.
But here we get to look at something that's not a shaman mirror. It's Epsilon from Mexico and Sequinox from Singapore. Communicating with their teams, ready to play some Hearthstone.
Ready to play some Priest. This one should be cool, I guess. So, Priest versus Priest.
False confidence, TJ. We need to put on the show right now.
Now, we've actually seen, especially this week, a huge surge of Silence Priests.
Yeah.
Silence Priest can end games quickly, and Silence Priest does really, really well against other versions of Priests.
It does.
Because, you know, the 2 main minions that you have that are going to deal damage are Ancient Watcher for attack.
Humongous Razor Leaf.
And Humongous Razor Leaf for attack. Those things are going to stick on the board. They're not going to get removed, and it's just a matter of time before you draw Purified Divine Spirit and Fire and just boom.
Yeah.
End the game. So, this matchup, while, you know, we joke and say, wow, this could be a long one. If one of these decks, or both of them are Silence Priest, this could get really explosive. And the most popular Priest deck that I've seen in the past week has been the Silence Priest, not only in tournaments, but on ladder as well. It's a deck that's picking up a lot of hype. It's gaining a lot of steam in competitive play. And Sequinox is rubbing his hands together, and that means Silence Priest.
Yes, it does. All right, so Sequinox does have Silence Priest. Epsilon could still be just a Control Priest variant. We actually saw her on Hunter in her first foray into the Hearthstone Global Games a couple of weeks back. So Priest is gonna be interesting. We'll see how it goes. You said Silence Priest moves very quickly. How does Silence Priest do against the other variants of Priest? You said it's favored because of those 4 attack minions.
Just wrecks them.
Just good? Just real good. That looks pretty good.
You just put a 4 attack minion on the board and then wait to buff it up until you can kill him in 1 turn, and then you just win.
You just kill him.
But I haven't played much of it. I've actually played quite a bit of Silence Priests, but I actually haven't played much in the mirror matchup.
Okay.
Or not in mirror matchup, but against other priests.
I've played a fair amount of the other priests, but I haven't played against Silence Priest very much.
Yeah, in Silence Priest versus Silence Priest, it's actually just the first player to draw the nuts wins, because Silence Priest usually doesn't run Shadow or Death. So even if you interfire something up, they're usually not going to get there. And, you know, there's some crazy things where you can actually use silence to silence down another minion.
Okay, yeah. Fair enough.
Like, but usually it's just the player. It's not like a fun matchup to play competitively. But this one might be. But it looks like Sequinox already has a pretty decent start with Ancient Watcher and just silence, because that 4/5 is gonna get it some work, and you're a priest yourself, so you can protect it by healing it up, by power shielding it, and so coining out is, I think, definitely the right play.
I mean, you know that there's no way that Mexico's going to remove this or even challenge it.
Yeah.
Might as well get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I feel like
right
Epsilon
away.
was winning this match really hopeful, and then the coin Ancient Watcher came down, and yeah, sadness.
I mean, Epsilon's hand looks pretty good.
Yeah.
If she were playing against another Dragon Priest, she's got extended value with Elise the Trailblazer. No dice.
No dice. Just gonna play the Radiant Elemental, but this is gonna get eaten up.
Ooh.
Yeah, they're thinking about it, but I don't think there's really a question here. I think this is just an attack and heal all day long.
Yeah. No reason to Divine Spirit this turn. You want to
Yeah.
do that at the peak of health.
Next turn, Powered Shield. Well, next turn, Powered Shield plus Divine Spirit.
That's pretty
And then
good.
all of a sudden, you're at the point where Inner Fire all of a sudden becomes like 1 mana deal.
14 damage.
Yeah, well, 1 mana deal 10 more
10
damage, but
Yeah, I'd play 1 mana Pyroblast.
I would too. I would too. But not a 1 mana Power Blast that reads you have to have a minion with more than 10 health on board in order for this spell to work.
It's a little situational.
Yeah. But Mexico really going to think about this one. I just... it feels bad playing Gluttonous Ooze just into something that's going to die, but you also have to keep the health of that Ancient Watcher in check. The one thing that Silence Priest struggles with is they just don't have many minions. A lot of their deck is spells, and a lot of those spells need to be pieced together. And if you can just chip away at their minions to a point where, you know, getting to the point where they can piece those spells together becomes difficult, then and limit the amount of minions that they can stick onto the board, then you can win. But looks like they're going to opt to just not play anything, and that just seems like a death wish.
I mean, I kind of understand why they wouldn't have had anything to do this turn that they knew of, and Ooze Shield gives them something to do.
Yeah.
Now that they've drawn in the Talon Priest, obviously they would have had something, but there's no way they could have known that. Potion of Madness is actually a reasonable pickup.
Ooh.
Oh, Sequinox looks happy about that one.
This one's getting spicy.
If you pick up Inner Fire...
Powered Shield into Divine Spirit into Inner Fire, is that lethal?
It's 15. Can you pick up...
A second Divine Spirit?
Well, there's another Power Word Shield.
Second Divine Spirit they wouldn't have mana for.
No. Second Power Word
They can
Shield means
Power
that they
Shield-
have 19 this
They
turn.
can Power Word Shield into second Power Word Shield.
And that would...
Be 22? No, they still
They
wouldn't have
still
it.
wouldn't have lethal.
But it's pretty darn close. And at this point, you don't Inner Fire because you want to play around Shadow or Death.
Yeah.
But it's getting pretty darn close. Now, they are limiting the maximum health that their Ancient Watcher can get at the moment just by trading into, but that would get traded into regardless. So I guess it's not the biggest of deals, and they're just going to play this Northshire Cleric because there's really not too much of a reason not to at this stage. Potion of Madness doesn't really punish them, and fitting that mana in is actually pretty important at this stage because, especially even with, if they pick up like Power Shield into another Divine Spirit, they might be looking at a potential lethal next turn. Sounds crazy.
On the flip side, if Mexico is somehow able to kill the Ancient Watcher, then Singapore doesn't have anything left, really, to be able to do.
Is someone injured?
You wish to live forever.
Well, that doesn't seem like a really strong play, but that's all they got at this stage.
Gonna try to cut off the card draw instead of the spell discounts.
It's not too bad.
Oh. Okay, so heal up to 7, 14,
That's
28.
lethal.
That's lethal.
Wow.
Okay. So if you add up those two games and you divide them by 2.
That was cool. This is what happens, and Sequinox is just very happy. That when you pull out that combo as Silence Priest, it feels
pretty good.
really good.
And Epsilon doesn't even look mad about it. She's laughing. She knows that sometimes Silence Priest does nutty things, and it's a meme deck, but it's a meme deck that can kill you really fast.
I don't even know if it was mean Nick. Mike Dene was right. He was right all along.
Purify might be too strong.
We can just eat. Everybody can just eat our words and bow down to him. It's actually a strong deck. It's picking up traction, and you know Osaka, even though he played Crest Rogue a lot on his run, hit #1 legend with the deck, and the amount of games that you win on like turn 5 is actually really scary. The deck has the built-in failsafe of just you need those combo pieces, and it runs pretty small amount of minions. So if you don't draw those minions and you draw all your spells, you get into games where you just can't win.
Yeah.
But there's also some games where you look at your open hand and you're like, I just don't think I can lose.
Win the game.
Yeah, so it's a pretty crazy deck. very polarizing as far as like its draws go, but it's explosive and it wrecks other priests, as you can see there. So
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
yeah, a refreshing fast match, a fast game in the match actually. And now we go to the ace match, which is Inus versus Envy, and it's going to be Druid versus Warlock. We actually are going to see Warlock. I'm actually surprised, especially considering Warrior were still in the pool.
Yes, Warrior was, and Envy could not have played his rogue deck. So Warrior up against Druid or Warlock, probably not the best options. I think the Warlock here for Yunus is probably the right choice if it is a Zoo build.
Yeah, I suppose you're right, because if he had a Pirate Warrior build, which is probably the case, then it would be not that great against Zoo and not that great against the Aggro Druid. If it was a Tom Warrior build, I would queue that up all day long. But then again, you don't know if it's Aggro Druid. It might be Jade Druid, in which case...
I think I would expect it to be Jade Druid, in which case I wouldn't want to queue Quest Warrior.
It's crazy to me to think.
I don't know that I'd want to queue Quest Warrior against Zoo. I think you're probably okay because you have Whirlwind, Sleep with the Fishes, Ravaging Ghoul. You've got so much removal, but I would not want to queue Quest Rogue again or Quest Warrior against Jade Druid. Yeah,
that's true. I sometimes forget. It's been a little bit since I've cast and I haven't cast global games at all, even though I've watched it a lot.
Yeah.
But it's strange to me to realize that Jade Druid is much more popular than Aggro Druid in the Hearthstone global games. So I automatically see Druid and I'm like, oh, okay, it's Aggro Token Druid, which is what I'm used to. But
we've seen a little bit of Aggro Druid, but not nearly as much as Jade. Seems
rare in global games. But okay, an age-old matchup. This is a matchup that we actually saw quite a bit in the previous set, which is Zoo Warlock versus Jade Druid. Maybe it fell off a little bit towards the end, but now it's back and in full force, at least for this specific ace match of this specific week of Hearthstone Global Games.
Back and in full force, at least for the next 10, 15, 20 minutes or so.
Ooh, the Ravenous Pterodax. That's actually a card that can snowball very heavily against decks that are slower, that lack card removal. All of a sudden you get +3 attack, +3 health on that adapt, and you can eat a minion that's pretty inconsequential on the board. That's a 4-mana 7/7. Even if you get like +3 health, Divine Shield, +3 health, Wind Fury, +3 attack, and Divine Shield. Yeah, there's a lot of good combinations that make that card really annoying for Druids to deal with, especially if it comes down pretty early in the game and can eat a minion that's not doing much on the board.
Well, Zoo's not a great choice for this current meta, but if you're going to queue it against Jade Druid, it's still pretty reasonable.
Yeah. They get the wild growth, and they have a decent curve and a lot of early game stuff, so they're going to be able to fight back pretty well, but it's going to be the case of, well, is it good enough? Because Zoo still does Zoo things. It's still a powerful deck that if it gets a good start and is playing against a slower deck, it can capitalize. Because Jade Spirit here doesn't do much in the way of contesting the board. It's a 2-3 and a 1-1. I guess a 2-3, a 2-2, and a 2-1. Zoo is great at trading up and dictating trades in a way that's favorable for them. That's always been one of the strengths of Zoo, is playing for the board. And so if that's your plan, is just to try and match them at their own game, you're going to lose.
It's also one of the weaknesses of Jade Druid. They have to spend the first several turns really investing a lot into the generation of Jades and the ramp of the mana so that they don't have the ability to generate their own board, or they're forced to deal with minions, in which case they delay their own game plan.
Yeah, this seems weird, but I really don't mind this play from them. They ramp up their Jades a little bit in a cheaper way, and they clear up one of these minions, and instead of letting the Zoo player dictate the trades, they sort of force them on themselves. But this is going to be a tough situation now because
the Councilman's going to be very difficult for Singapore to remove.
Yeah, and it's got to be Councilman here, and the question is whether or not you value trade with Direwolf Alpha, or if you just trade in the 1/1 and better play around swipe, better play around just being able to hero power down the Direwolf Alpha.
If you play out the Councilman and trade the Villager, then you do also get 1 attack buff on the Councilman, so it's a 2/5. But in that same vein, if you play the Councilman, you trade the Direwolf, then you can Pterodax likely the Possessed Villager on the following turn.
Yeah.
I think I like this. I think I value the Direwolf better.
Ooh.
That's a whiff.
You hate to see that.
Innervating to nothing.
Now, this all of a sudden makes Nourish a great draw, though, when you draw the Innervate this early. But, I mean, that's a 2-of in their deck out of, what, the next 22 cards? 23 cards? So that's less than
10%.
Less than 10% chance to draw that. And, I mean, what other cards are good in your deck? I guess...
Behemoth is good.
Behemoth, Primordial Drake would be excellent,
Swipe's
especially with the Innervate.
Yeah, Primordial Drake would be insane.
Yeah, but...
So you're looking for Nourish, Behemoth, or Drake.
I mean, they're going to use the Earthen Scales now?
Oh.
Ouch!
Why do you want to do that?
I mean, I guess they just want to make the trades tougher because that 2/2 Jade all of a sudden gets traded over by...
Oh, man. This limits them to only 6 mana next turn, which makes the draws worse. I mean, you're trying
to
you're trying to target this councilman is what's happening here. Singapore wants it dead.
Yeah, and
But
I don't think you even need to play Ravenous Pterodax here. I think the Defender of Argus and then make some value trades is not too bad.
you play into swipe, which kind of sucks.
But I mean,
But I think
feel
if Singapore had swipe, they would have used it.
yeah, or maybe if they swipe, they only have 1 card left, and swipe Hero Power doesn't even clear off the board. Oh, that is a saving grace. But they're going to need some help off the top for the rest of the game.
Because Yunus just has damage for days here. An additional 4 attack buff from the Dark Iron and the Abusive, plus 2 more on the Councilman here is going to be 16. Plus they're developing the Dark Iron, which is a reasonable body.
Yeah. Singapore needs to slam Behemoth into Primordial Drake. That's what they need.
I can win them the game.
That can win them the game. And even then, it might still be tough. But the one thing that they have going for them is that the trades for... If Yunus and Mexico wanted to trade, the trades are bad. So this sort of forces them into an aggressive plan. That's the one thing that they have going for them. And that's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to go wide on the board and start pushing the damage. They can put up to 10. I don't think trades are necessary here.
Force the Druid to do it. They have 1 card in hand.
Yeah, they're playing off the top of their deck. Force them to draw.
Oh.
And they miss the damage. Ugh,
That's a sequencing error there. And that's a bad draw for Envy to boot.
That's it. I mean, it's actually not that bad. It's just a 1-mana 5/5. That's not too bad. If they can stabilize with a Feral Rage or a Taunt, they might be home free. This is 6-7 damage, 8-9 from the Abusive Sergeant.
Envy could have been at 14 this turn instead of 15.
Which would give them a Doomguard out.
Do they still have the Doomguard out? They have 7, 9.
They don't. No,
They
they'd
have
be
14. No.
They'd be 1 damage off. Oh, they get it anyway.
They don't need Doomguard because they have Leroy.
Never punished.
Wow.
Doesn't matter at the end of the day. And Yunus is incredibly happy about that one. He's doing a dance. He's just dancing.
Him. After winning that Shaman Mirror and then losing to the Priest so quickly, now small sequencing error, missed a damage in that game, but picked up Leroy off the top, and that's all she wrote, folks. That's going to be a 3-2 victory for Mexico over Singapore.
Yikes. And, we said earlier that this is really going to tell us how this group is going to, shake it out at the end of the day. And I had high hopes for Singapore. I respect a lot of those players. I've met them a few times, but, they just weren't able to get it done today. They had the weird rogue deck that just didn't get anything done for them.
It was, that was still this series. Yeah, it was weird.
The Shaman battle where they have now like 70 minutes of VODs to review if they want to, see if they could have played that matchup better. But, and looked like they were on the verge of stabilizing at the end there. But the Leroy Jenkins came out and just exactly weren't able to get it done. And,
that was the one card they needed to draw. TJ,
yeah, no. So Singapore
they were so far ahead.
would have had. Yeah, they were so far ahead. Singapore would have had to draw like a taunt minion. They would have had to stabilize, and they would have had to dodge damage draws for like the rest of the game, essentially.
Yeah.
Aside that, so while the Leroy gave them the game that turn, they likely would have had it the following turn anyway, because of the way the game played out. But who knows? maybe that next card was a Primordial Drake. Maybe the following card after that was also a Primordial Drake.
It's possible.
It's a possibility, but we'll never know.
Yep, and ultimately, 3-2 victory for Mexico over Singapore. That's going to put them at a 2-1 game score, or match score, excuse me, in their group. And Singapore now going down 0-2. And this is exactly how they did it. Yinus picked up 2 wins, first off with that dominating Quest Rogue performance, and then, of course, with the Zoo Warlock. And then Panizado on that marathon of a Shaman Mirror. Absolutely a deserved win for them. That game was
I
one
love
for
the way
books.
Mexico played that one. They really held on to their cards all the way to the bitter end, and they played around the hex as much as they could, put on the damage, and were able to win in fatigue, which is crazy. Love the way they played that one, and that one goes down in the history books.
That was quite a game.
For
And
Hearthstone Global Games.
As much as we joke about that match took forever, but that was a game to watch. It was There's so much intense decision making.
If you look at it as a whole, and instead of like
and
piece by
mind
piece,
reading, it was so complex. And when we're seeing some games in Hearthstone like that first one, the Quest Rogue versus the Miracle Rogue, where Quest Rogue just did its thing and won very quickly, to have a game like that Shaman Mirror where every little decision mattered was kind of refreshing at the same time. But here's how Group G is shaping up. Turkey still in first place with a 2-0 match record, but Mexico now moves up to second with 2-1 and a 7-7 game record. So their game record's not too great, but their match record is looking pretty good right now compared to the rest of the group. Singapore has fallen 0-2. But this group still has a lot of contention for who the top 3 spots are going to be.
Yeah, but Mexico put themselves in a good position. They win one more, they're likely out of the groups in a good position, moving on to the second group phase. And Singapore, they basically have to win out from here. Their game score is okay for games that they've lost. It was
They've been close matches.
2-2-3s, but it's effectively win all their matches or go home from this point out. So a tough road for Singapore.
Yeah, very unfortunate for them, but Mexico is going to take that win, and we do have an interview ready with our winning team. Let's see who it's going to be. Irving, congratulations, man. Very well played. I have to ask, that Shaman Mirror, what did you guys think about that? It was a long one, and there was so much intense decision-making, but you guys played it incredibly well. What was going through your mind in that game?
Well, I'm still kind of sleepy. But we, at least Empanizado, trained the matchup a lot this week. So we knew we wasn't running the greedy shaman list as Singapore, but we just save our resources and trying to dodge the hexes for Aya and make it useless at the end when we had so much pressure on board.
So what did you think of the Silence Priest deck that Singapore brought out? It wasn't a good matchup for you guys, and they got the lethal on turn 5. How'd you guys feel about that loss?
I mean, sometimes you get high roll, but we expected to lose against Silence Priest because the 4 attack minions just destroy Priest. But we feel confident about the Druid match. Warlock against Druid match, so don't worry.
Well, it certainly worked out for you guys. Tell me a little bit about the communication within your team. You're now up 2-1 in your group, which is a really good record so far. What has it been like working as a team, even when you may not be in the same location as each other?
We drive with Discord. We always, before send the deck list, we are all together on the call and trying to decide or best lineup for each one. And Panizo is playing Shaman very well. I'm kind of, feel bad about that mage matchup. I could have played better, but yeah, we have a very good communication and very happy about this 2-1 score. Even we know we have to get better.
So well, just one last question for you before you go. Do you guys, now you're 2-1, do you think you'll be able to make it out of the groups and make it on to the second group phase?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we are looking for the 4-1 score. We are not trying to speculation anything about 3-2 and try to wait for not be out of the three best teams in the group. A great advantage is that we are the last selection in play in the group stage, so we can decide if we can even lose and still qualified. So I think that's great for us.
Well, fantastic job. Congratulations again on your hard-fought win today. And best of luck moving forward, guys. Really well done.
Thank you.
All right. They worked for that one. That was a long series.
I think we cut him off. I think he was trying to tell us something.
Oh, no.
Blink twice if you're in trouble, Irving.
Irving, no. Irving, are you okay?
No, but I think a well-played match overall. You could hear, I guess Empanizado was practicing that matchup. That's what Irving said.
Good for him.
That's a tough matchup to practice, but, props to them because I said later on, once I realized what was happening, I felt like Mexico played the later stage of that game really well.
Going back on it, like in hindsight,
it
was a very well done.
Yeah, but they're in a good spot. He said their goal is 4-1. We'll see if they can make it there.
Absolutely. They've got a great shot. It's a team of not very competitive players, but from the way that they played that match, I don't think you would really know it. There were certainly some small mishaps from both teams, but that Shaman game in general, I think we just want to highlight that one because it was the one that stood out the most. It was the one with the most intense decision-making. Did go back and forth, but like you said, Mexico had some very quality gameplay there. So I'm expecting big things from them and from the South American community as a whole. We have seen some really great stuff from them so far, and I think we will continue to do so as well. Just a quick reminder of what we saw today. First match, Chile took a 3-1 victory over Japan, and then we just saw Mexico with a 3-2 victory over Singapore. So South America reigns supreme today on the Hearthstone Global Games, and Southeast Asia faltering a little bit, but those groups are still very much not decided.
Is it Mexico
these
and
teams
North
can
America?
come back up. Yes, but Latin America.
Yeah. I was about to just get up and leave. Just walk off.
TJ.
That was my one zinger for the day. I'm done. Sorry, Cora. I had to do it.
Okay. It's okay. Rob would have done it.
Yeah, but it was a fun day overall. I enjoyed it. We had some long matches. We had long games. We had some short games. But overall, it is actually really impressive to see Latin America do well because a lot of people think that Asia Pacific was the region that's like sort of catching up to Europe.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's Latin America that's going to do it. Argentina on top, Chile moving up there, Mexico second place in the group.
Yep. Brazil still in it to win it.
In it to win it.
A couple of losses. That's okay.
Yeah. That's okay.
That's okay.
But we'll see how they do in the future.
All right. That's just about going to do it for week number 5 of the Hearthstone Global Games. Thank you so much for joining us, and make sure you tune in on Tuesday and Wednesday next week for the Play Hearthstone broadcast out of the Polish studio with our friends Raven and Sottle. And I believe Falcone is coming back next week as well. So that will be, I believe, 1 a.m. Pacific on Tuesday and then 7 a.m. Pacific on Wednesday. And then, of course, right back here, 6 p.m. Pacific next Thursday. I'll be joined by Rob Wing again, but it's been great having you here, TJ. I know this was a marathon of a day, but really some fantastic insight, and it was a pleasure getting to work with you once again.
It was fun. It was fun. Thanks for having me, even though it was me that decided.
All right, good to know who pulls the strings backstage. Thank you so much again for joining us, and we will see you guys next week for more Hearthstone Global Games action.